008. Yes, with stories for you. Our next guest is Julie Macken. Julie, welcome.
Thank you.
You're back by popular demand.
I know, and plus the sound went wrong last time.
So here we are, the clock has moved on, the date has got closer to a whole range of things, including the council elections.
I know, right? And Chippendale, we need to talk about Clover.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Actually, no, it's not really Clover I want to talk about, but I don't know if you remember about 24, 25 years ago, Clover Moore had walked around the neighbourhood going, vote for me, knocked on our door and went, vote for me. And I said, we need a pedestrian crossing at the intersection of Myrtle Street and City Road. And she said, well, if you can show community support for that, I'll back that. And I said, how do you do that? And she said, well, give me a petition, right? So we collected about 600 signatures on the petition, old school, paper petition.
Can I just slow down? 600 local signatures?
Yeah. I walked all around the neighbourhood. Everyone was like...
20 years ago?
I think it was even longer than that, but it was at least 20 years ago.
Gosh.
Because everyone was tired of nearly getting killed crossing City Road, right? Victoria Park, only green space for about 5,000 miles. And so, but you take your life in your hands trying to get there.
So
right?
here we are 20 years later, and I've got news for you. There is no crossing.
No, but here's the story why there's no crossing. So I, being a rookie, I got all the signatures, posted it off to Clover's office and didn't make a carbon copy. Sent the originals anyway. But I'm thinking, oh, well, we're all honourable people here. Second mistake. Third mistake is it came to the vote and I thought, well, okay. And Clover voted against it. She joined with the Liberals and voted against getting a crossing at the intersection of Myrtle Street and City Road.
And then when the issue came to council...
Yeah, she voted it down. She sided with the Liberal councillors, voted it down. I was so scandalised. I was working at the Financial Review at that point. So I rang up her office, Julie Macken from the Financial Review, and said, WTF, why did you vote that down? I got put through to her second in charge, a bloke, young fella.
Larry?
I don't know his horrible name. But anyway, he goes, yeah, we voted it down because actually you don't really want that. So can you see two mistakes there? One, yeah, we voted it down. Two, because you don't really want it. I went, mate, 600 of our community signed a petition saying that's exactly what we want. He said, yeah, but you hadn't thought it through.
Wow.
Yeah, this 3-year-old child, fellow, bloke, dare I say it, white guy, is telling me, cranky, vicious old lady, that I am totally delusional and I only thought I wanted to safely access Victoria Park, but in fact I didn't really. What I really wanted was to take my life in my hands, go up to the intersection of Abercrombie and City Road, chance it across the pedestrian crossing, hope that no one runs the lights because 5 people have been hit there in the last 30 years, and getting to... Anyway, I hit the roof and I said, mate, 600 of us actually do want that. 2, Clover knows that. 3, she asked for it, I gave it to her. 4, what is this kind of dodgy crap behaviour? And he said, well, it's too close and the RTA don't like it. I said, the RTA have given Sydney University students their own air bridge, their own set of lights, and another set of lights 2 inches away in case they'd like to cross there instead. Like, are we so worthless that we don't even warrant one set of lights? And he went, So, council elections, December 4, I say, let's vote for the person who will do 2 things. 1, give us a set of traffic lights at the intersection of Myrtle Street and City Road. And 2, not tell us that actually what we think we want, we actually don't really want, because we're kind of delusional and crazy and don't really want safe access to the only green space within 5,000 kilometres.
I've been discussing this with you as long as I've known you.
I was a child. Was barely able to walk when we first started. Look, I tell you what, I've seen old people get hit there. I have seen women try and cross with prams. We've seen 5 fatalities at the intersection of Abercrombie and City Road since the 70s.
Yeah.
You know, like, this is deadly business. I make light of it, but actually it's really deadly, and we don't have green space anywhere.
Right.
So if you're a woman with kids, if you're a bit older, if you've got a dog with you, if you're just as impatient as me.
All right, Julie Macken, see me after class and we will plot. Now...
So just let me finish.
Yes, ma'am.
There is only one party who has agreed to put a set of traffic lights there.
Which party is that?
That would be the Greens.
Right.
Clover's not going to do it. Independents aren't going to do it.
Well,
certainly the Liberal Party aren't going to do it.
What about Linda Scott?
I haven't asked Linda. That's your job.
Right.
Ask Linda. Ask Linda if she'll do it.
I've
But
lost control.
right now,
I've lost control.
I'm sorry, the Greens will get my vote pure. But, so what does that have to do with bushfires, right?
Can I just ask, the more we talk, do I get more jobs or, you know...
That's how it's going to roll.
Okay. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah. Anyway, whatever. So that's important. And I was thinking about it because, like, local elections are a chance for all of us, to get really pretty particular about our kind of thing, right? But more importantly than that, they're also a chance to see if the people that we're electing will actually listen to us. And more than not getting a safe crossing into Victoria Park, what did my head in was actually doing the work, 600 signatures, doing the work of showing that this is what our community wants. And then being told, no, it's not, and we won't
Julie
give it to you.
Macken, I've got it. No.
Yeah?
No.
All right.
This is my time, briefly.
Okay. Yeah, go. You want to talk? Go ahead.
So, I think you know that I was once the holder of low political office in there. I think that there's a larger issue, and I think it's important that we marry the two issues. Because power is exercised according to the number of hands that go up. If we can reduce the majority or the number of hands that go up, not just for Clover, but for her team, suddenly her hearing will improve, the voting will improve, and the staff will treat us with less contempt. So I'm serious, we need to make sure that there's a rebirth of democracy in Sydney City Council. You fired me up. I'll be quiet. I want to ask you one more question because time is limited.
Because I've used up all the time. Sorry.
When we last spoke, you spoke about being a firefighter, and I found it hard to keep up with you then as I am now. How did you get into firefighting living in an inner city suburb in those big fires out there? I think you said you started at Pittwater, which is this big estuary with cliffs and so on. Can you that was where you started. Can you remind me of what...
Yeah, our family bought a house down at Coasters Retreat back in the 60s or 70s.
So it's a little village and you can only get there by boat?
Yeah, you can only get there by boat. You get the ferry across from Palm Beach. And at that stage, it was just a nice, scuzzy little fishing place full of ferals. It's changed slightly over time, but nevertheless, we still live there. And in 1994, if you remember, we had those catastrophic fires, and all of us at Coasters and around there nearly lost our homes because we had the fires start. And luckily, my dad and my little brother, Sean Macken, actually shouldn't have been there. But anyway, they took the chance and did a kind of backburn, hoping that the backburn would not take out everyone's houses, but would in fact meet the fire, which is what happened. So all the houses survived. Right. And after that, all of us decided that next big fire we needed to have boots and helmets, and not just thongs.
And pumps?
Pumps would be great too. We wanted the whole catastrophe. But because there are no roads there, so we started our own little shed.
Now fast forward, if you don't mind me saying so, several decades, you're in Chippendale.
Yeah.
And in the 2019 catastrophic fires in the Blue Mountains, you were up there fighting. So you're in a fire brigade, or what do you do?
So
What's the mechanics?
So Coasters Retreat, we've got our own fire shed. So every Sunday of the end of the month, we go down, we do training, we've got pumps. Everyone laughs at us because we don't have a big red fire engine. We've actually got hand pumps that you run up the cliffs. It's really hard work. So anyway, we're a shed. We're a fire shed.
So your shed went and fought, but you have no fire truck. How did you go and fight in the Blue Mountains?
Well, every morning they'd do a call out for a strike team, and we'd turn up at the marshalling yard around Allambie Heights or Terry Hills with about 200 other people and about 20, 50 big red fire engines. We'd get allocated a driver for the day. Sounds like a chauffeur, but it wasn't. And we'd pile into the truck, we'd grab bags of lollies, bottles of water, and then head out wherever, like Blue Mountains or Wiseman's Ferry, or some were sent to Canberra.
So you went up to the Blue Mountains. Tell us about that night.
Yeah, so we were being sent different places every day. And this particular day we were sent up to the Blue Mountains, where it was not the Blue Mountains that I was telling you about. We'd gone up the Bells Line of Road.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Sorry, yeah.
So we're at the top of the Bells Line of Road. The Gross Valley Fire's down there.
Yeah, gotcha.
And it's this now monstrous mega fire.
Yeah.
We're at the top there where there are some serious kit by way of homes with paddocks, helipads, swimming pools, the whole catastrophe. And the thing that I marvel about finding the bushfires is the idea of private property completely disappeared. Like when we turned up to what would have been kind of $20 million estates, we'd drive through, we'd drop our hoses into their swimming pools, drain their pools, drive all over their manicured lawns in order to be ready to fight the fire. And I really loved that. Like it was like really amazing to go, when push comes to shove, private property does not matter. Preservation of life, preservation of animals, this matters.
So you're down the bottom of the Gross Valley?
No, we're at the top, we're at the Bells Line of Road, and the fire's coming up from the Gross Valley, and we spent the entire day trying to put in control lines to stop it roaring over the top and taking all of these
What's
homes.
A control line?
A control line is where you basically, in a controlled manner, you are lighting the bush and pushing it down. So it's burning down towards the oncoming fire. So you're trying to increase the space that the fire's got to jump, in the hope that you can hold that line, that the canopies above you don't reach, so that when the fire comes up, you've got a chance of fighting it.
Right.
So the bigger the control line, the deeper the control line, the better. So we've been doing this all day. We're patrolling up and down, up hills, down dale. It's really hard work. I'm an old lady. It's a dad's army proposition, really. Anyway, 7 o'clock at night, we're exhausted and we think beauty. We go up to the top, to the very swanky house that was now looking a bit iffy. The horses are galloping around screaming their heads off. You can barely see anything. The birds are flying when they should have been asleep. Like everything's wrong. As an animal, every part of me went, get the hell out of here. But we're thinking, great, we can bundy off. And then this young jock, whose name shall remain nameless, as will his fire shed. Anyway, he's in charge. He's his first rodeo. And he goes, okay, we're not leaving. We're going to drive back down and we're actually going to try and put in a control line at the bottom there. I tried not to cry at that point because I'm a grown-up and I don't do that. So we jump in the trucks. A bulldozer has been through and try to bulldoze a path down this really steep incline. The trucks are not made for this kind of rally driving.
And the truck's carrying water, isn't it?
Yeah, but not enough for my liking. So we're carrying the water down there. We get to the bottom. There's a kind of big, a control line down there. The guy running the show is at the top and he's yelling down from the safety of a cleared paddock, going, we'll just send your water down. And like, if you know a bit about it, you need water pressure. you desperately need water pressure when you've got a freight train of a fire heading towards you. Where kind of our little fire truck didn't have much water, and it took us half an hour to get down there, and if the fire hit, it would take us 40 minutes to get out. I went up to an old guy there who's been in the RFS for years, and I said, what do you reckon about this? He said, I reckon we're going to die. I went, now I'm really scared. So we were walking up the line. Luckily, our captain was a very smart bloke, very good guy, very cool. I said to him, I don't want to die here. We don't have enough water and we can't get water in. And you go and tell Jock Boy at the top there that unless we get a monster tanker down here with water, we're leaving. And you just don't do that. You just don't do that, because everything bad will happen if you do that. But I'm thinking, I can't even run out of here. The inclines were so steep. I did actually try, booted, I couldn't get up the incline. So I'm thinking, I would be so angry if I died down here because some jock couldn't get his shit together to
So
give
what
us
did
enough.
the captain say?
Well, he was really good. We're kind of trying to with this dribble of a hose coming out, and all the snakes are running and the spiders are running and everything is running from this oncoming onslaught. And suddenly this guy appears out of nowhere with a huge tray of sandwiches in a Tupperware thing and went, hi, I just live up there. I thought you guys must be hungry. And we went, oh. And then the captain said to him, you live up there? And he goes, yeah, by the way, are you sure you guys feel safe here? And the captain goes, not really, but we can't get the big tankers down. And the guy goes, mate, I'll just cut all my fences. Then you can get the tanker down. Hang on to these. So I'm holding the sandwiches, and he runs up, cuts every fence in his property. Suddenly we got this monster tanker down to the bottom, and we were back in business. Like we could hold the line because we had enough water and we had a really fast way out. And it was terrifying and extraordinary.
And I recall you saying you don't know their politics or anything, you just go there and you do a job together.
Yeah, everyone's there to...
Yeah. And I just want to say something that I need your confirmation. You thought you were going to die, but the animals, the snakes, the birds flying away from the fire, they were already dying. You could hear the screams of the animals and the things as the fire was coming.
Everything died.
Yeah.
Everything died.
Yeah.
Billions of animals burned alive.
Yeah.
And those that didn't die by being burned
Yeah.
died of starvation in the following days.
Yeah.
Like, this is why we cannot allow idiots to make the call on how we protect each other from climate impacts.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know?
I want to end on this note. It's become clear listening to you that one function of our little 2008 is to have conversations like this which give us clarity about what is and is not important to us. It's been really terrific to talk to you. I've got lots of homework. Thank you very much.
Got lots of jobs.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I'll ask you back again, but
No.
you've
wouldn't.
been terrific. Thank you very much.
No worries. Thank you.
Welcome to our next guests. We've barely met in a sense, so could you tell us who you are and not the address, but roughly where you are in Chippendale?
Of course. I'm Declan.
And I'm Tori.
Yeah.
And we both live in Rose Street, just around the corner from here.
Oh, you're still sweating from the big walk here, I can see.
It was a long walk.
When did you guys come to Chippendale?
We actually came to 2008 in 2008. We were living in Paddington at the time, renting in Paddington. Had dreams of living in a terraced house where we were living at the time in Paddington, but knew we certainly couldn't afford there. And then started to look for houses or at least terraces in this area. Looked in Surrey Hills, which was kind of the hot suburb at the time, couldn't afford there. Looked in Erskineville, couldn't afford there. But Chippendale, we realised, was beautiful with an incredible location and also had terrace houses that are wide fronted, which is actually quite rare to find in Sydney. And so we fell in love with it and bought and have been here ever since and absolutely love it here.
So why do you love it here?
It's a good question. We've been pondering that. I think there's a few reasons. The first one, which is very clear to most people, is location. Chippendale is just so uniquely placed to allow you really to get to anywhere in Sydney quite easily as well. I mean, many years ago I lived in Waterloo, and it could take you 25 minutes to get through the quagmire of O'Riordan Street and Burke Street just to try and go somewhere, whereas Chippendale, you've just got so much on your doorstep. Walking distance into the city. If you think of that kind of equidistance, it's sort of the opposite end of the rocks when you think about how close we are. So yeah, definitely location is certainly top of the list.
What don't you like?
We were also thinking about this and actually really struggled to find things that we don't like about.
It's good that you've prepared.
Well, we saw the podcast previously and thought we should at least be prepared for these questions, and we're starting to think about what we don't like. And we really struggled to find things that were actually meaningful. We've got a few gripes, of course. I think everyone does in certain things. We love the diversity of the culture here. I think there are lots of, long-termers like us, and then there are lots of students as well. But we were saying probably one of the potential downsides of lots of students is the transient nature, that there's always turnover of people in some of the rented accommodation, and that does accumulate a lot of people's stuff being left in the road. And that was probably one of our only negatives that we could find, even though our council is incredible here and will pick up anything. People don't tend to call the council, they tend to leave them in a big pile, which escalates into a really big pile.
It's weird, isn't it?
It's
It is
weird.
strange.
It's something
It's
about
just
this
a phone
suburb.
call.
I don't know why.
Absolutely.
It's a phone call.
And it's pretty prominent on the website. What do you do in your house? Do you just live there, or do you grow things, or what have you made of your house?
The house we've been renovating our house really since we got there in 2008, and it's just been sort of projects over time. I enjoy gardening, so we've managed to have a nice sort of renovation out the back in the small courtyard that we have. We've got a lovely green wall, and I love to kind of potter around there on weekends and beautify it. Many years ago, we shared our house. We got into we were early adopters to the Airbnb game, so we rented out a couple of bedrooms, and we saw for probably 2 years or so, 150 plus different guests coming through the house, and that was always really interesting to get their take on Chippendale as well, and experience that sort of early stage of when home sharing was a lot more about the connections and a little bit less than it is now, being more mature about a cheap room. We really enjoyed it.
So I gather you've stopped.
Yeah, we stopped after a while. It got to a point where, look, the main reason we did it, and be totally honest, people would talk about the community and the connection. That's great, but you do it for the commercial outcome. You do it to earn a bit of extra rent on the side. Yeah. So it sort of got to the point where we thought, you know what, that's enough. We're keen to enjoy our home on our own.
So are you unfaithful to Chippendale? Do you leave and go out of town or overseas? What do you do?
Doesn't feel like it over the last 2 years. I feel very connected to Chippendale.
Is that because of the virus, or?
Yes, lockdown. That's what I'm talking about there.
We do love travelling, so I think that's certainly we found COVID has stopped what we would have done. Definitely some travelling this year. Yeah. In fact, we were travelling at the time that COVID hit, so we decided to take a 6-month break off in our careers, and we spent the first 3 months in Canada, which was incredible. And then literally everything stopped at that moment, and there was the call home from Scott Morrison saying, everyone overseas, you've got to get back now. So we had that moment of, what are we really going to do here? We've got another 3 months. Neither of us our jobs aren't starting for another 3 months. What are we going to do? So we decided to go to the UK and see my family, which was part of the trip. And we've both got British passports, so we knew we would be let in there. But we arrived day one of their lockdown.
Oh,
so we spent 3 months in lockdown in the UK.
It was honestly, it was so surreal walking into, I mean, they didn't have quarantine back then. We sort of landed at Heathrow and went straight to Bath, where Tori's family are, and we went straight into a supermarket that evening to buy lockdown food, really. And it was, I think at least half the supermarket was bare. You know, lit aisles and aisles stripped bare, honestly looking like an apocalypse. It was such a strange feeling.
How did you get back?
We were there for 4 months, 3.5 months, and we flew home. Let me think. We had friends that visited us, and they didn't have to go through quarantine, but we had 2 weeks of hotel quarantine.
Right.
On the way
We couldn't
back.
take up the flight we booked back. Obviously, they had all, Qantas had stopped flying by that point, so it was, Singapore was the last airline that was flying into Sydney, and at the time there were no caps, so we were really lucky that we were able to get, even though it was hotel quarantine, we didn't have to pay for it, and there were no caps at the time, so I think, you know, we
What's
could all
a
go
cap?
in. A cap is a limit of the number of people that can arrive and be in hotel quarantine here, and they severely limited that over through the pandemic, which has meant that a lot of people haven't been able to make it back to Australia, because if the hotels can only take 3,000 people a week, it means only 3,000 people can land each week. And there are a lot more people wanting to come home. So I feel like we were incredibly lucky to make it just before that cut-off period. And obviously not having to pay for that horrendous hotel quarantine experience. We're grateful for that too.
The experience you've had of the impact of the virus is international, and I just wonder, how do you see yourself and travel overseas now?
It's a good question. I think it's a question lots of people are pondering at this point. I think we'd like to travel soon. Certainly we wouldn't be lining up for the November 1 flights. I think there's just far too many unknowns at this stage. We would love to travel early next year. I think there's still challenges around the operational nature of how that works. Challenges around PCR tests 72 hours and 48 hours before and all those sorts of things. I think in general I'd feel relatively comfortable being on a plane for 12 hours.
I'm feeling more and more COVID illiterate. What is a PCR test?
Sorry. The swab test. So there's two types of kind of key COVID tests.
Right.
One being PCR, which I can't even remember what that stands for, but that's where they're putting the swab down the back of your throat and down the back of your nasal cavity, and that goes to a lab. The other type is a rapid antigen test, which is you do it yourself, almost like a home pregnancy kit type thing. Not that I'm saying you have lots of experience of home pregnancy tests, but I think we've seen them all in the movies. We can we get the concept.
I think you'll be able to buy those at Coles next week. I think they were saying that you'll be able to buy a check to see straight away, but I don't think they're as accurate. But I think the airlines will require the more expensive 24-hour test. So I think the challenge is going to be different airports, different countries requiring different things. It's going to be a challenge to link all of those things up worldwide.
I'm so out of my depth here. You have such a knowledge of the virus red tape. Is that because...
We'd love to travel again.
Like
we're waiting to go.
These things. Yeah.
My sister had a baby since we've been in lockdown, and I'm desperate to go back to the UK and see her. And yeah, it's definitely, we've definitely got that travel bug. But again, certainly aren't going to run into it until I think a few things are ironed out. I think you were mentioning that there's issues around travel insurance at the moment.
Yeah.
There's definitely challenges, and I think that there are obviously people who have missed loved ones and all of those things for a very long time, and I think those will be the ones that go before Christmas. But hopefully after Christmas it will become more of a reality again.
Is what's motivating you the fact that you've got family overseas, or it's just that the dynamic of travelling is attractive?
Both of those things. I think being Australian means different to different people because we're so multicultural, but when my connection to Australia is my parents. I'm the only Australian-born Gallagher in my family tree. My older brother and sister were born in the UK, in England, and my father's from Northern Ireland originally, and my mum is from England. So there's always been that. I've always felt Australian, but part of a global citizen, so to speak. So the whole concept of travel is just part of being who we are. Well,
Yeah.
certainly that's the way it feels for me, whereas I think Tori's probably the same. So travelling's just part of life, right? It's something that if we
Right.
can't do that, you don't feel completely fulfilled.
But I'm hearing something else from you both. That is, you don't seem discombobulated or a different self, either of you, whereas certainly I do, and others I speak to. So you look as though you can get back on the horse straight away, and the virus hasn't changed your outlook or your sensibilities at all?
I don't think it's been easy.
No.
I think that we've certainly felt that the feeling of being hemmed in at home, even though we love our home and love being around here. We've welcomed, I mean, in that lockdown, that those walks each day was the being able to walk down to Glebe and walk down the water there was tonic to our soul.
Yeah.
And I think it has been tough, definitely. But I think that I'm so excited that I feel like we're hopefully on the home straight on this now. And I think that the opportunities that it opens up as our economy and everything does open up and all the borders open up, I hope that we can get back to it. I think there is a concern, and I'm sure you've seen it as well, that the vaccination rate in Chippendale is apparently lower, about 10% lower than the rest of Sydney, which is a shame. I really hope, though, that is more that they have the numbers incorrectly. I'm not sure that we've got as many students here as they would imagine, so I'm really hoping that's the case, because I can't see any reason why we would be less than any other suburb. But I think that's probably the only concern at the moment is if we're not at the same level as everyone else, what that means for our suburb. But hopefully that's incorrect counting from a census from 2016.
And what it means for going to buy the food and the stuff in the shops and so on, or going to the pubs and so on. It would be, I think, unlikely that the data about Chippendale is accurate.
I would agree with you. I really hope so.
Yeah.
I certainly don't feel that there's any kind of, when you speak to people in Chippendale, there's no kind of, anti-vaxxer sentiment or anything like that. So I don't think it's that. I think if anything, it's probably we've got a younger population in Chippendale, and they haven't had access to the vaccine in the same way as we have, as as the rest of us. So hopefully hopefully it's an anomaly rather than the case.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Well, I guess the last question I have for you is, do you think, putting yourselves to one side, the virus has changed things, not just for Chippendale, but for politics generally, the way we as a society do things and think about things? Have you thought about what the virus may have done to us as a country?
I've thought a lot about how it will change behaviours on a macro scale, right? But we hear a lot about the way we work. I mean, it has completely and utterly changed the shape of work for white-collar workers, right? People that work in offices. That is completely different.
So if I can just briefly interrupt, you're both white-collar workers, aren't you?
Yep.
Yeah.
I had a friend I have a friend who's in the UK. He works for Barclays Bank. I remember him saying 3-4 weeks into the pandemic, it was probably April 2020, I think they had something like 6% of their workforce set up as being able to connect from home, to have the connectivity in place from IT and HR to be a remote worker. 6% of their organisation is probably 30,000 plus staff. 4 weeks later, and that was a 2 or 3 year journey to get to that point. Right. A push by the business. COVID happened and they probably hit something like 80 or 90% 4 weeks later. Wow. Right? Like that's the kind of...
That's an amazing...
When the only way you can do your job is to have to... That's a big company, isn't it? Enormous. So like Barclays Bank, like a big, enormous employer. So I think those sorts of factors will be very interesting in the way that will reshape local economies. I mean, if you had opened a cafe in, Stanmore a month before COVID hit, you've probably done really well. You've probably had an incredibly successful business. You've been able to open for most of the time. You've had this enormous base of customers who are all working from home, and you hadn't factored that into your plans when you opened that business, right? So the kind of winners and losers, I think, is interesting. I think your question was probably a bit more broad than that, right? But
it's a big figure that you give for that bank. What's your sense of things?
Well, I think blended working is a big change, and I think that working from home is I think any business that doesn't offer that to their staff post-pandemic, they're going to lose staff. I think that is what we're going to see, and I work for a big media organisation at the moment, and they've always been very much about being in the office kind of shows that you're there and you're working, and I think that has changed hugely. I think it's now about your output rather than the number of hours, and that they don't need to watch you, and I feel that that's been a really good shift and an exciting shift, and I think that work-life balance has changed immensely.
Well, not that I want to improve either of you, but there's a book called The 7-Day Weekend by a Brazilian billionaire, written about 12 years ago, about our remote offices and working. I can't recommend it highly enough. It's a fabulous book.
Great.
So there's my gift back to you for
Thank
the
you.
gift
Thank
of
you,
your
Michael.
time.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you. All the best. Thank
you very much.
Our next guest is Reilly O'Byrne Inglis. I did it! Got it right.
Well done.
Now, you're not from Chippendale, are you?
No.
Right. Where are you from?
I grew up in the Southern Highlands, in a place called High Range in the Southern Highlands. Then I lived in WA for a few years, then I lived in Sydney for a few years, and now I live in Canberra.
What are you doing here?
I come here to work, so I work at Knox Street,
Yeah.
on the Knox.live social media and the various events and programs.
My heart's starting to beat a bit faster because you're one of the team, and it's exciting to be
It's
working
really-
with you.
It's exciting to be working
Yeah,
with
yeah,
you.
yeah. I mean, these are early days, but early days are great days, I think, don't you?
Yeah, there's so many possibilities.
Look, thanks. Already thank you, but just listening to this already, it's really great that you've come from Canberra to give us some ideas for the program. What's your background in production and in what we're doing, all the stuff that's happening behind the scenes here today?
So my background is predominantly in performance, and then through doing performance, so like as an actor and a musician, like a vocalist, I have ended up on this side, sort of the production side as well, and marketing and all of that, because it all kind of, in order to be able to do your performance, you end up learning how to do all the other things as well. And I've just found that I really love it. And the more I've done it, the more it sort of builds, and then you end up getting a lot of practice and continuing on doing it.
Well, I want to pat myself on the back because I only asked you on the spur of the moment when we were having our little production meeting this week, and it just seems to me that this is a great thing to do because you're in Canberra. We've got you while you're here, so I'm hopeful that there'll be things that you'll do and find and think about on the way back. You are going back to Canberra?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to get rid of you.
I promise I'll go back.
So it makes sense, doesn't it, that you've been on stage and now you're off stage and doing that sort of stuff. I have to say that I find people in your world, and I'm part of it, almost incomprehensible. If I'm talking to a bus driver, I know he drives the bus, I know they get paid. My partner's a teacher. She's been paid up until the last week. I don't know what lies ahead for teachers generally, but it must be a different world because please correct me if I'm wrong, there's no regular income, is there?
Well, working with Knox.live is the first time in 10 years I've had a regular income from the industry that I have trained and studied in.
Wow.
So, and I've been so it's been 10 years that I've been working in the industry, and I've done paid jobs as an actor and in other capacities, and this is the first regular paid job I've had. So I've always had to do other jobs. Like I've had so many jobs because you just have to do everything you can, and then creatively and outside of that.
So how does Reilly look after Reilly in that uncertain financial world?
It's been a long learning process, which I'm obviously still learning how to do that. I think the last 2 years, oddly enough, because obviously lockdown and coronavirus had a massive impact on the arts industry and me personally. I lost so many projects.
And money.
And money, oh yeah.
Because you only get paid when you do something, don't you?
Yeah, yeah. But it also helped me realise that like my identity exists outside of the work and outside of what I'm being paid to do, and that I'm my own entity, and that's helped me look after myself a lot better.
Wow, that hit home for me. If you can define yourself absent or not depending on money to be who you are, particularly in an uncertain financial world, that's got to be some kind of rock, I think. That's a really good thing to hear.
It's been a very healing process to, start to be able to... Obviously, people will say that to you, you're not defined by your work, you're not defined by this, but to actually feel it is not as easy as...
So it didn't just happen, you had to work for it.
I've had to work for a long time. And I always will. Like, it's never going to be finished.
Reilly, you've made my day. That's just a wonderful thing to hear.
I'm so glad.
Because I'm as old as the hills, and I'm still struggling with it. I've been a lawyer, I've been a this and a that, and I think many of us, even this Bezos guy who owns one of the richest people in the world, he's just been up on a rocket and looked down at the earth, and he's had some sort of, oh, that's all there is. And he's saying, gee, it's pretty delicate, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I don't want to go up, in a rocket to come to that realisation, but you're young and you've come to a point that I've yet to arrive at. I want to just say, I think that is really impressive. Well done.
Oh, thanks.
Good. If you've got any notes you can leave behind, that'd be fantastic.
I'll have a think.
Good on you. So, I wonder, what do you think of when you think of the word Chippendale?
Chippendale, for me, is very linked in with Knox Street Bar, because this place, I've been coming to this place for a long time. It's very special to me. So for me, a lot of it is about the nightlife, the art scene. That's, to me, is Chippendale and Knox Street Bar are very interlinked. Yeah. Right.
Have you walked around?
Yeah, because I've ended up spending a lot of time here over the years. So I've spent time in Chippendale. I think it's a beautiful spot because you're close to everything. You're really in the city, but you're also, there's still some like access to nature, and I think that's a very special part.
Nature?
A little bit. And more than...
Where is it?
There's the park.
Okay. I think it is amazing that we are in the heart of a city and there is so much nature. You walk down some streets and you think, well, there's a lot of plants here.
And people have their little veggie gardens. I was walking along yesterday and someone had a pumpkin patch, and I just think that's...
In Chippendale?
Yeah, just up the road down there, and just a pumpkin patch sitting there. And there was some chilies as well.
Right.
I think that's brilliant. And I don't see that in sort of an urban setting very often.
Do you see it in Canberra?
No, no, not really. Not on this sort of on the footpath. Everything's very back and restrained in Canberra.
Yeah. It's a place I can make a lot of comments about, but it's best ignored in this moment because we're talking about Chippendale. Is there something here you don't like?
I find a lot of noise and intensity quite difficult. I get a lot of sensory overload, and my anxiety can get quite heightened. So I like coming here when I come here, and I like being able to go back into my quiet little hole where it's quiet and I have my garden and my cats. Yeah.
What noise do you hear here?
Like the vibrations of like cars and horns and sirens and people yelling and just all that, like traffic noise, and which a lot of people feel it's that's the hum of the city, it's the energy of the city. Whereas for me, I'm like, yeah, you know, George Gershwin hears things like that, and you know, right, Rhapsody in Blue, and I have a panic attack. Like it's.
Well, you're quite close here to some of Australia's busiest roads. I think of them as rivers of steel. In the heart of Chippendale, which is my street, it is amazingly quiet, even though life is coming back to its busyness. It's so quiet there, and I think it's because of buildings like this, which act as a castle wall and deflect the noise. So I have nothing more to quiz you about. I ask you to say one word to the viewers about why you're doing this, what you like about the project or what you hope to achieve by being involved. What's Reilly expecting of 2008 and Chippendale?
I think an avenue for people to share experiences and stories, and being able to be involved in that, and having various guests who may not otherwise get to chat about their stories, and people being able to hear that. I think that's invaluable.
What I would like to see is that, but I'd also like to see us tell the story about how this is different, say, to a country town where people go to the city and may go back now and again and rarely go back to stay. Whereas, I don't know what the figures are, but it seems to me as though Chippendale has been experienced at some stage in their student life, working life, theatre life, whatever, by so many people across Australia and overseas. So let's explore that outside this discussion and see if we can bring the truth of that to the light of day.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming down. I'm so glad you've been here, and if it's too noisy here, I've got this really quiet joint around it.
Thank you.
Good on you, Reilly. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Cheers.